The classroom was huge. It had seats for more than 500 students from many different planets. The walls were white and clean. Big screens covered the front wall, showing pictures of space battles and military plans. Commander Vexthar stood at the front. He was tall, almost 8 feet high. His body was covered in hard shell pieces that looked like armor. He was from a planet called Kralix. His people were known as Great Warriors. He had been teaching at the Galactic Military Academy for 30 years. Today he was teaching about defense strategies. The screen showed how to protect a planet from enemy attacks. He talked about where to put soldiers, how to use weapons, and when to retreat. His voice was loud and clear. He made clicking sounds when he talked, which was normal for his species. The classroom was full of noise and movement. Students from different worlds reacted in different ways. The Draxi students had scales that changed colors when they got excited. Right now their scales were bright red and orange. They were interested in the battle plans. The Theron students had feathers. When they heard about combat, their feathers stood up. They made clicking sounds with their beaks. This meant they were happy and eager to learn more. The Corthan students had bodies made of crystal. When they focused on something important, their bodies glowed brighter. During this lesson, they were glowing like bright lamps, but in the back row, 3 human students sat very still. They did not move much. They did not make sounds. They just watched the teacher with calm faces. Jake Morrison sat on the left. He was a big young man with short brown hair. His shoulders were wide and strong. He came from a place called Denver on Earth. His eyes were fixed on the teacher, but his body looked relaxed. He could have been watching a cooking show instead of learning about war. Next to Jake was Lisa Chen. She had long black hair tied back in a simple way. Her arms were crossed over her chest. Her face showed nothing. No fear, no excitement, no interest. She just watched and listened. On the other side of Lisa was Marcus Webb. He had red hair and green eyes. He sat very straight, but not in a tense way. He looked comfortable, like someone sitting in their own living room at home. Commander Vexthar noticed them. He had been a teacher for a long time. He knew how to read the body language of every species in the galaxy. Each species showed their feelings in different ways, but they all showed something. When he taught about combat, the Draxi always got excited. Their scales rippled and changed colors. The Theron puffed up their feathers and made happy sounds. The Corthan leaned forward, their crystal bodies glowing brighter with interest. Even the usually calm Vreen students would blink their 3 eyes faster when hearing about battles. But humans just sat there, quiet, still, like statues. It was strange, and it bothered Commander Vexthar. The lesson continued for 2 hours. Commander Vexthar showed videos of real battles. He showed planets being attacked. He showed soldiers fighting and dying. He showed ships exploding in space. These were real events from real wars. The other students reacted strongly. Some looked scared. Some looked excited. Some looked sad when they saw soldiers dying, but the 3 humans in the back row showed nothing. Their faces stayed calm. Their bodies stayed relaxed. When the class ended, students started leaving. They talked to each other in many different languages. Some were arguing about the best defense strategies. Others were discussing the battles they had seen. The 3 humans packed their bags slowly and quietly. They did not talk much to each other. They just nodded and walked out together. Commander Vexthar watched them go. He felt confused and a little worried. Were these humans sick? Did they have some problem with their emotions? Or were they just bored by his teaching? He decided to talk to his colleague about this. Instructor Tavara taught psychological warfare. She was from a species called Ilani. Her people could sense emotions and thoughts. Maybe she could help him understand the humans better. He found Tavara in the teacher's lounge. She was tall and thin with smooth silver skin. Her eyes were very large and glowed with a soft blue light. She was drinking something hot from a cup. "Tavara, I need to ask you something," Vexthar said, sitting down across from her. "Of course, Commander. What is bothering you?" Her voice was soft and musical. "The human students. Have you noticed how they act in class?" Tavara nodded slowly. "Yes, they are very quiet, very calm. At first I thought maybe they were not very smart. But then I checked their test scores, and—" Vexthar leaned forward. "They are excellent. The human named Jake Morrison scored 2nd best in the entire academy on the tactical assessment test. Lisa Chen wrote the most creative strategy paper I have read in 5 years. Marcus Webb solved a combat problem that most students cannot even understand. Vexthar made a clicking sound of frustration. Then why do they sit so quietly? Why do they show no emotion when I teach about warfare? Every other species shows something. Fear, excitement, anger, interest. But humans show nothing. It is strange, Tavara agreed. I have tried to sense their emotions during class. I can feel them, but they are very controlled, very calm. It is like they have seen everything before. But that is impossible. Earth has been at peace for 2 generations. These students have never been in a real war. They should be nervous or excited to learn about combat. Instead, they look bored. Tavara put down her cup. Maybe we should just ask them. Sometimes the direct approach is best. Vexithar thought about this. Yes, you are right. I will call them to my office tomorrow. We will ask them directly why they are so quiet. That night, Vexthar could not stop thinking about the human students. He had taught thousands of students from hundreds of planets. He had seen shy students and confident students. He had seen scared students and brave students. But he had never seen students who showed so little reaction to lessons about war. War was serious. War was scary. War was exciting. It should cause some kind of emotional response. But the humans treated his lessons like they were hearing about the weather or learning about plants. It made no sense. He pulled up information about Earth on his computer. The planet was mostly water. It had 1 large moon. The humans lived on the land parts in big cities. They had joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago. Before joining the Council, humans had fought many wars on their own planet. The file showed hundreds of conflicts. Big wars, small wars, wars that lasted years and wars that lasted days. But all that had stopped when they joined the galaxy community. For the last 50 years, Earth had been peaceful. No wars, no battles. They had become traders and diplomats. They were known as fair and honest in business. They were calm in negotiations. They never got angry or upset. So why did their military students act like war was boring? Vexthar closed the file and went to sleep. Tomorrow he would get answers. The next morning came quickly. Jake, Lisa, and Marcus received a message on their communication devices. They were asked to come to Commander Vexthar's office at 10 o'clock. The 3 humans walked together through the academy halls. Other students moved past them in groups. Some were rushing to classes. Others were studying together in corners. The academy was always busy and full of life. Do you think we did something wrong? Marcus asked. He kept his voice low. Lisa shook her head. Our grades are good. We have not broken any rules. Maybe they want to ask us about Earth or something. Jake said nothing. He just walked with his hands in his pockets, looking calm as always. They reached Commander Vexthar's office. The door was large and made of metal. Jake pressed the button on the wall. A sound came from inside. Come in, said the commander's voice. The door opened. The office was big but simple. One wall was covered with medals and awards in glass cases. Each one glowed with a soft light. These were honors from different wars and battles. The commander had fought in many places across the galaxy. Commander Vexthar sat behind a large desk. Instructor Tavara stood beside him. Her blue eyes looked at the 3 humans with interest. Good morning, cadets, Vexthar said. Please stand at ease. This is not a formal meeting. The 3 humans relaxed their posture a little, but they still stood straight and professional. They were trained to show respect to their teachers. We asked you here because we want to understand something, Tavara said. Her voice was gentle. We have noticed that you human students behave differently from other species. Ma'am? Lisa asked. Her face showed confusion, but nothing else. You sit very quietly in class, Vexthar explained. When I teach about combat and warfare, you show no reaction. Other students get excited or nervous or scared. But you 3 and other human students just sit there like you are watching something boring. The 3 humans looked at each other. Something passed between them. A shared understanding. Then Jake spoke. Sir, we are paying attention. We are learning everything you teach us. We just do not show it the same way other species do. That is exactly what puzzles us, Vexthar said. He leaned forward. Every species has natural reactions to warfare. The Draxi get excited. The Theron puff up their feathers. The Korthan glow brighter. These are biological responses. They cannot control them completely. But you humans show nothing. Why? Marcus cleared his throat. Sir, may I speak honestly? Yes, please do. We want to understand. The things you teach in class are not new to us, sir. We have seen them before. We have experienced them before. Not in real life, but in training. So when you show us a battle or explain a tactic, we already know about it. Tavara tilted her head. But Earth has been at peace for 50 years. You are all young. You have never been in a real war. How can you have experienced these things? Through simulations, ma'am, Lisa said. We train in very detailed computer simulations. They show us every kind of combat situation. We practice over and over until we know how to respond to anything. All species use simulations for training, Vexthar said, but they still react to real combat footage and tactical lessons. Why do humans not react? Jake took a breath. Sir, how many hours of simulation training do other species do before coming to this academy? Vexthar thought about this. Draxi cadets typically train for about 500 hours. Theron trained for about 800. The most dedicated Korthan might reach 1,000 hours. Why do you ask? The three humans looked at each other again. Lisa spoke first. Sir, I have over 14,000 hours of combat simulation training, and that is just my official training. It does not count the time I spent playing strategy games or studying military history on my own. The room went silent. Commander Vexthar's clicking sound stopped completely. Tavara's eyes went very wide and bright. 14,000 hours, Vexthar repeated slowly. That is almost 2 years of continuous training time. Yes, sir, Lisa confirmed. I started training when I was 14 years old. I trained every day until I was 21. Then I applied to this academy. What about you two? Tavara asked, looking at Jake and Marcus. I have about 12,800 hours, sir, Jake said. Almost 16,000 for me, Marcus added. Vexthar stood up from his chair. He walked to the window and looked out at the training grounds below. Young students were running exercises. They looked so eager and new to everything. I need to see these records, he said quietly. Do we have access to your training files? Yes, sir, Marcus said. All our records were sent to the academy when we enrolled. You have full access to everything. Tavara was already at the computer. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. I am pulling up Jake Morrison's file now. The screen filled with information. Basic data appeared first. Name, age, home address, test scores. Then the training records loaded. Tavara stared at the screen. Her mouth opened slightly. This says Jake completed 3,241 different tactical scenarios. He participated in almost 9,000 simulated combat engagements. He witnessed over 47,000 simulated casualties. 47,000, Vexthar repeated. He turned from the window. Jake, you have watched 47,000 soldiers die in simulations? Yes, sir. Some were my own troops. Some were enemies. Some were civilians caught in crossfire. The simulations are very detailed and realistic. Check the others, Vexthar said, his voice tight. Tavara pulled up Lisa's file. The numbers were even higher. Over 4,000 scenarios. More than 11,000 engagements. 63,000 simulated casualties witnessed. Marcus's file was the highest. Nearly 5,000 scenarios. Over 13,000 engagements. 71,000 casualties. Commander Vexthar sat down slowly. He looked tired suddenly. I have been a soldier for 30 years. I have fought in 4 real wars. I have seen about 3,000 people die in combat. You 3 have witnessed death 20 times more than that, even if it was only in simulations. And this is normal for humans? Tavara asked. This is standard training? Yes, ma'am, Lisa answered. Anyone who wants to join the Galactic Military Academy from Earth must complete this training first. It is required. Why? Vexthar asked. Why does Earth require so much training? Your planet has been at peace for generations. The 3 humans were quiet for a moment. Then Jake spoke. Because peace does not last forever, sir. History teaches us that. Every civilization that forgot how to defend itself eventually fell. Earth decided long ago that we would never forget. We would stay ready. We would train every generation to be prepared for anything. So you sit quietly in class, Tavara said slowly. Because you have already seen everything we teach. You have already experienced it thousands of times. Yes, ma'am, Marcus confirmed. When Commander Vexthar shows us a defense scenario, we are not shocked or excited because we have defended planets hundreds of times in simulation. When he shows combat footage, we are not scared because we have already died hundreds of times ourselves. In simulations, of course. So your calmness is not boredom, Vexthar said. It is familiarity. Exactly, sir. The news spread fast through the academy. By the next day, every teacher knew about the human training records. They talked about it in the staff room. They discussed it during lunch. Some teachers were amazed. Others were concerned. Commandant Zoral was the head of the entire academy. He was a Korthan, and his crystal body was covered in marks that showed his military honors. Each mark represented a battle won or a mission completed. He had more marks than anyone else in the academy. He called a meeting of all senior teachers. 20 instructors gathered in the conference room. The room had a large round table and big windows that looked out over the academy grounds. "I have reviewed the human training records," Zoral began. His voice was deep and had a slight ringing quality like crystal bells. "What we believed about humans was wrong. We thought they were a peaceful species that sometimes produced warriors. But these records tell a different story." Professor Kelman raised one of his tentacles. He was the Academy's expert on how different species think. "I agree, Commandant. Humans are not a peaceful species that learned to fight. They are a warrior species that chose peace. That is very different." "Explain the difference," said another teacher, a Draxi named Sorax. "A peaceful species learns to fight only when they must," Kelman explained. "They see war as something bad that happens sometimes. But a warrior species sees war as always possible. They prepare for it constantly. They train for it even during peace." "Humans do this," Commander Vexthar spoke up. "I propose we test them. Not just the humans we talk to, but all of them. We need to see if their simulation training actually works in practice." "What kind of test?" asked Instructor Tavara. "A war game," Vexthar said. "We take 20 human cadets and put them against our best tactical team. We make the scenario difficult. We see how they really perform under pressure." Commandant Zoral's body glowed brighter, showing his interest. "Yes, this is a good idea. We will create a realistic scenario. We will give them a hard mission, and we will see if thousands of hours in simulation have really prepared them." The teachers agreed. They spent 2 days planning the war game. It would be a planetary defense scenario. The humans would be the defenders. The teacher team would be the attackers. The attackers would have more soldiers and better weapons. They would have surprise on their side. The defenders would have to hold out for 72 hours with limited resources. It was designed to be very difficult. 20 human students were selected, including Jake, Lisa, and Marcus. They were told about the war game and given 24 hours to prepare. The night before the war game, Jake sat with Lisa and Marcus in their study room. They were looking at maps of the area they would defend. The map showed mountains, rivers, cities, and military bases. "They are going to come at us hard," Marcus said. "The teachers want to prove something. They want to see if we are really as trained as our records say." Lisa nodded. "We should expect heavy attacks right from the start. They will try to overwhelm us quickly." Jake studied the map carefully. "This terrain is similar to Scenario 743 from our basic training. Remember that one? Mountains on 3 sides, river valley in the middle." "I remember," Marcus said. "I ran that scenario maybe 50 times. Lost most of them until I figured out the right approach." "Same here," Lisa agreed. "The key is not trying to hold everything. You have to pick your strong points and make them really strong. Let the attackers take some territory, but make them pay for every step." The 3 of them worked late into the night. They planned defensive positions. They figured out supply lines. They predicted where the attacks would come from. But they did not look stressed or worried. They looked focused and calm. The war game began at dawn. The simulation room was huge, taking up an entire building. Each student got their own pod with screens and controls. Inside the pods, everything looked and felt real. The technology was very advanced. Jake took his position as one of the defensive commanders. His screens showed the terrain, his troops, and his resources. He could see Lisa and Marcus on the communication channel. 17 other human students were also connected. "Everyone ready?" Jake asked over the communication system. "Ready?" came the replies from all around. The simulation started. Almost immediately, warning signals appeared. Enemy forces were approaching from the north. A lot of them. The teacher team was not wasting time. "Contact north, heavy forces," reported one of the human students. "At least 3 battalions. "Expected," Lisa said calmly. "Execute Defense Plan Alpha." Everyone moved to assigned positions. The human defenders moved smoothly and quickly. No panic, no confusion. They had done this hundreds of times before, even if only in simulations. In the observation room, Commander Vexthar watched with other teachers. They could see everything happening in the simulation on their displays. They are not rushing, Tavara observed. Most cadets would panic when seeing such a large attacking force. But the humans are following their plan exactly. Because they have seen this before, Vexthar said. In their thousands of hours of training. This is just another scenario to them. The first attack hit hard. The teacher team threw everything at the northern defensive line. Explosions filled the screens. Simulated soldiers fell. Buildings crumbled, but the human defense held. They had positioned their troops in overlapping fields of fire. As the attackers advanced, they took heavy losses. The defenders fell back slowly, making the attackers pay for every meter of ground. After 6 hours, the teacher team had captured some territory, but they had lost 30% of their forces. The humans had only lost 8% of theirs. This is not going as planned, Commandant Joral said. He was leading the attacking force himself. They are fighting like experienced veterans, not students. Try infiltration, suggested another teacher. Send stealth units around their flanks. The teacher team sent their best stealth specialists. 3 experienced instructors led small teams through the mountains trying to get behind the human lines. Inside his command pod, Marcus watched his sensors. I have movement on the eastern ridge. Looks like stealth units trying to flank us. Expected, Jake replied. Execute counter-infiltration plan Beta. Teams 4 and 7 moved to intercept. The human defenders had placed sensors and traps in the mountain passes. They had anticipated this move. The stealth teams ran straight into an ambush. In the observation room, the teachers watched in surprise as their stealth units were eliminated quickly and efficiently. How did they know? Asked one instructor. They did not know, Professor Kelmon said. They predicted. They looked at the terrain, considered what they would do if they were attacking, and prepared for it. This is pattern recognition from thousands of training scenarios. The war game continued through the day and into the night. The teacher team tried everything. Direct assaults, flanking maneuvers, psychological tactics, cutting supply lines. They used every trick they knew. The human defenders adapted to each new tactic. Sometimes they succeeded. Sometimes they failed and lost ground. But they never panicked. They never broke. They just adjusted their plans and kept fighting. By the end of the first day, the humans had lost about 20% of their forces. But the attackers had lost 45%. The war game was not going the way the teachers had expected. Commander Vexthar looked at the tactical displays. They are reading us like a book. Every time we try something, they have a response ready. It is like they already know what we are going to do. Because they have fought this battle before, Tavara said. Not this exact battle, but thousands of variations of it. They recognize the patterns in our tactics and apply the solutions they learned from their training. The second day of the war game began with a sunrise that existed only in the simulation. Inside their command pods, the human defenders had been working in shifts. Some slept while others stayed alert. They had planned this rotation carefully. Jake woke from a 4-hour rest period. He checked the status displays. The situation was stable but difficult. They had lost more ground during the night. Their resources were getting low. Several defensive positions had fallen, but they were still in the fight. Morning report, he said into the communication system. Lisa's voice came through. She sounded tired but focused. We lost positions 7 and 12 overnight. Enemy forces pushed through the valley, but we made them pay heavily for it. Their advance has slowed. Casualties? Jake asked. We are down to 68% effective strength. Ammunition at 42%. Medical supplies at 50%, Marcus added his report. Enemy forces are at about 50% strength. They are regrouping for another major push. I estimate they will attack within 2 hours. Jake studied his tactical map. The situation was bad but not hopeless. They had trained for worse. Recommendations? Pull back from the outer positions, Lisa suggested. Consolidate our forces into a tighter defensive ring. We cannot hold the entire perimeter anymore. Better to hold less ground more strongly. Agreed, Marcus said. And we should set traps in the areas we abandon. Slow them down cause more casualties. Jake made the decision. Execute withdrawal to secondary defensive line. Set delayed charges in abandoned positions. All units acknowledge. The human forces pulled back in good order. It was a difficult maneuver to do under pressure, but they did it smoothly. They had practiced tactical withdrawals hundreds of times in their training. In the observation room, the teachers watched this move with interest. They are giving up territory, noted Sorax, the Draxi instructor. Are they admitting defeat? No, Commander Vexthar said. They are being smart. They know they cannot hold everything with their reduced forces, so they choose what to hold and what to give up. This is advanced tactical thinking. Commandant Zor-El prepared his forces for the next attack. Push hard on their new defensive line. They are weakened. Now is our chance to break them. The teacher team launched a massive assault. They focused all their remaining strength on 3 key points in the human defensive line. It was a coordinated attack using everything they had left. The battle was intense. Explosions filled the simulation. The sounds of combat were everywhere. Both sides took heavy casualties. For 2 hours, the fighting was constant and brutal. But the human defensive line held. Barely, but it held. When the assault ended, both sides were exhausted. The humans were down to 43% strength, but the attacking force was down to 30%. Neither side had the resources for another major battle. The rest of the second day became a war of attrition. Small skirmishes, raids, counter-raids. Both sides trying to gain any small advantage they could. The human defenders were tired. Inside his pod, Jake felt the mental exhaustion of constant decision-making. But he kept his focus. Beside him in their own pods, Lisa and Marcus were doing the same. All 20 human students pushed through the fatigue. They had trained for this. Long simulations that went for days. Scenarios designed to test not just tactics but endurance. Their bodies were tired, but their minds knew how to keep working. Night fell again in the simulation. The third day would be the final day. 72 hours would be complete. If the humans could hold out until then, they would win the war game. In the observation room, the teachers held a conference. They were frustrated but also impressed. "We are losing," Commandant Jor-El said simply. His crystal body was dim, showing his fatigue. "We have thrown everything at them. Superior numbers, better weapons, surprise attacks, infiltration, overwhelming force. And they are still holding. Their training is remarkable," Professor Kelmon said. "Every tactic we try, they have a response. Not because they are geniuses, but because they have seen similar tactics in their thousands of training scenarios." Tavara pulled up the communication logs from the human side. Listen to how they talk to each other. There is no panic, no arguing, no confusion. They discuss problems calmly and solve them methodically. This is not natural talent. This is trained behavior. "Should we change the scenario parameters?" asked one teacher. "Make it even harder for them?" "No," Vexthar said firmly. "That would not be fair. We set the parameters at the start. We must follow them. Besides, we have learned what we needed to learn. Their training works. It really works." The third day began. Both sides were running on fumes. The teacher team had about 25% of their original forces left. The humans had about 40%. Neither side had much ammunition or supplies. The fighting was lighter now. Both sides were too exhausted for major battles. It became a waiting game. Could the attackers break through before time ran out? Could the defenders hold just a little longer? Hour by hour, the time passed. Small fights erupted and ended. Territory changed hands. Casualties mounted on both sides. But the human defensive corps held firm. Jake checked the mission timer. 3 hours left. Then 2 hours. Then 1 hour. The teacher team made one final desperate push. They threw their remaining forces at the weakest point in the human line. It was all or nothing. The human defenders saw it coming. "All units, final stand," Lisa ordered. "Everything we have. Hold the line." The last battle was fierce but short. Both sides were too tired to fight for long. When the dust settled, the attackers had been stopped. But barely. The mission timer reached 72 hours. A loud tone sounded in all the pods. The simulation ended. For a moment, there was silence. Then the pod doors opened. The human students climbed out, blinking in the bright lights of the real world. They were sweaty and tired. Some were shaking from exhaustion, but they were calm. The teachers emerged from their pods as well. They looked even more tired. Fighting an offensive war was harder than defense, and they had been frustrated at every turn. Commandant Jor-El walked over to the human students. They stood at attention, though it was clear they could barely stand. "At ease, cadets," he said. His voice was quiet but carried respect. "You have passed the test. More than passed it. You have taught us all a valuable lesson today. Jake spoke for the group. Sir, we made many mistakes. We lost a lot of our forces. If this had been real combat, many of us would be dead. True, Zoral agreed. But you held. Against superior forces, against experienced instructors, against everything we threw at you, you held. Because you were prepared. Because you had trained. Because you had failed thousands of times before and learned from each failure. The other teachers gathered around. They looked at the human students with new respect. These were not just students. These were warriors who had fought 10,000 battles before ever seeing real combat. Come, Zoral said. We have much to discuss. There will be a full debriefing. We all have things to learn from this experience. As they walked to the debriefing room, Commander Vexthar fell into step beside Jake, Lisa, and Marcus. I understand now, he said quietly. Why you sit so quietly in class? You are not bored? You are not uninterested. You are simply prepared. You have already walked through the fire thousands of times. What we teach you is confirmation and refinement, not revelation. Yes, sir, Lisa said, but we still have much to learn. Your real combat experience is more valuable than any simulation. We know how to fight. You teach us the wisdom that comes after the fighting. Vexithar nodded. His mandibles clicked softly, a sign of approval in his species. You honor me with those words, Cadet Chen, and you honor all of us with your dedication and preparation. The debriefing room was large and comfortable. It had soft chairs arranged in a circle. The walls displayed screens showing recordings from the war game. 20 human students sat on one side. 20 teachers sat on the other. More observers filled the back rows. Word had spread about the war game results. Several members of the Galactic Military Council had come to watch the debriefing. They wanted to understand what had happened and what it meant. Commandant Zoral stood in the center. His crystal body had regained some of its glow after rest. This debriefing is for all of us to learn, he began. Both teachers and students. What happened today was significant. We need to understand it fully. He gestured to Jake. Cadet Morrison, you led the defensive operations. Please explain your approach. Jake stood. He still looked tired, but his voice was clear. Sir, the scenario was similar to training scenarios we had all run many times before. Not exactly the same, but similar enough. We recognized the terrain type and the force composition. This let us predict likely attack patterns. How many times had you run similar scenarios? Asked Professor Kelmon. Personally, I have run planetary defense scenarios about 800 times. Some were very different from this one. Some were very similar. Each time I learned something new. What worked, what did not work, what to try next time. And when we attacked from the north with heavy forces, Vexthar asked. You seemed ready for that. It is a common opening move, sir. Overwhelming force at the strongest looking position. The goal is to break the defender's spirit early. I have seen that tactic maybe 200 times in training. We prepared for it. Lisa stood next. May I add something, sir? Please, Zoral said. We did not win because we are smarter or better than you. We won because we have failed so many times before. In my training, I probably lost 70% of my scenarios. I watched my forces get destroyed. I made bad decisions that got people killed, even though they were simulated people. Each failure taught me something. She paused, looking around the room. When you attacked today, we were not reacting with genius or talent. We were remembering. We remembered what happened the last time we tried to hold that position. We remembered what worked when facing a flanking attack. We remembered the mistakes we made before and avoided them this time. Marcus stood as well, and we expected to lose. Earth training teaches us that losing is normal. Failing is how we learn. So when things went wrong during the war game, when we lost positions or took casualties, we did not panic. We just adapted and kept going. This is what I do not understand, said a Draxi council member from the back. Why does Earth train so intensively? Your planet has been peaceful for 2 generations. You have no enemies. Why prepare so much for war? The human students looked at each other. Finally, Jake answered. Because our history taught us a hard lesson, sir. Many times in our past, civilizations became peaceful and stopped training their defenders. They thought peace would last forever. Then when war came, they were not ready. They fell. Lisa continued the thought. We studied these failures carefully. We saw the pattern. Peace does not prevent war. Preparation prevents war. When everyone knows you are ready to fight, they are less likely to attack you. So Earth trains every generation, Marcus said. We train hard. We train realistically. We make our simulations harder than reality so that when reality comes, we are ready. Not because we want to fight, but because we never want to be unprepared. Instructor Tavara spoke up. This explains so much about human behavior in the galaxy. Your diplomats are famously calm during crises. Your traders are patient in tough negotiations. Your scientists stay focused under pressure. We thought this was natural temperament. But it is training, is it not? Both, ma'am, Lisa said. Every human culture values different things. But all of us learn from a young age to think before acting, to prepare before doing, to practice until we are ready. This applies to everything, not just military training. Professor Kelmon stood. I have studied many species across the galaxy, but I have never seen a species that weaponizes patience the way humans do. You turn preparation itself into a defensive strategy. We prefer to think of it differently, sir, Jake said with a small smile. We practice panic until it becomes boring. We rehearse crisis until it feels normal. Then when real crisis comes, we are not scared because we have been there before. The room filled with sounds. Different species laughed in different ways. The Draxi made hissing sounds. The Theron chirped. The Korthan made bell-like rings. Even Commandant Joral allowed himself to make a pleased sound. But beneath the humor was something more serious. Everyone in the room now understood that they had been wrong about humans. The quiet, calm humans were not passive or weak. They were warriors who had chosen restraint. They were fighters who preferred peace. Commander Vexthar stood. I have a question for all the human students. When you sit in my class and I teach tactical operations, what are you thinking about? Several humans smiled. One of them, a young woman named Kate, answered, Sir, I am usually comparing what you teach to what I learned in my training. I am looking for differences. Sometimes you show us a tactic I never saw before, and that is exciting. Sometimes you show us something I know, and I am reviewing it in my mind, thinking about how I would apply it. Another human, a man named Peter, added, And sir, we are often thinking about your experience. You have been in real combat. You know things we cannot learn from simulations. How it feels when your friends die. How you make decisions when you are truly scared. That wisdom is what we come here to learn. Vexthar looked moved by this. His mandibles clicked softly. Thank you. That means more to me than you know. The debriefing continued for another hour. They reviewed specific moments from the war game. They discussed decisions, both good and bad. The teachers learned about human training methods. The humans learned from the teachers' real combat experience. By the end, everyone in the room had gained new respect for each other. The teachers saw that the humans were not quiet from boredom but from preparation. The humans saw that real experience brought wisdom that no simulation could teach. As the meeting ended, Commandant Joral made an announcement. What we learned today will change how this academy operates. We will study human training methods. We will consider how to incorporate some of their approaches into our programs for all species. Not to the same extreme degree, but enough to build the kind of experience library that makes humans so effective. He looked at the human students, and we will better appreciate what you bring to this academy. You are not just students. You are teachers too. Every one of you has walked a warrior's path thousands of times. That experience has value, and we will learn from it. The humans stood and saluted. It was a gesture of respect and gratitude. The teachers returned the salute in their own various ways. As people filed out of the debriefing room, small groups formed. Teachers talked with human students, asking questions about training methods. Students from other species approached the humans, curious about their background. Jake, Lisa, and Marcus walked together back to their dormitory. They were exhausted. The war game had been physically and mentally draining. That was harder than most of my training scenarios, Marcus admitted. Those teachers are really good. They have real experience, Lisa said. That makes all the difference. We know tactics. They know war. There's a big difference between those two things. Jake nodded. But we held. That is what matters. We proved that our training works. Not just for us, but for Earth. For humanity. They reached their rooms and said goodnight. Each of them collapsed into bed, falling asleep almost immediately. But even in sleep, their minds continued the patterns they had trained for years. Problems and solutions. Tactics and counter-tactics. The endless chess game of warfare that they had played so many times it had become part of who they were. They were warriors who had never fought a real battle. They were defenders who had never faced a real enemy. But they were ready. More ready than perhaps any soldiers in galactic history, because they had learned the most important lesson of all. The best battle is the one you never have to fight. And the best way to avoid fighting is to be so prepared that no one dares to start a fight with you. Humanity had mastered this lesson. They had turned preparation into an art form. They had made readiness their greatest weapon, and they did it all while sitting quietly in the back of the classroom, looking calm and peaceful, because they knew something the other species were just beginning to understand. True strength does not shout. True power does not need to show off. Real warriors can afford to be quiet because they have nothing left to prove. They had already fought their 10,000 battles. They had already earned their place. Now they could simply be. 3 weeks passed after the war game. Life at the academy continued, but something had changed. The way other species looked at human students was different now. There was new respect in their eyes, new curiosity in their questions. Commander Vexthar's classes had changed too. He still taught the same material, but now he paid more attention to the human students. Not because they were behaving differently. They still sat quietly in the back. But now he understood what that quietness meant. One afternoon he was teaching a lesson about orbital combat. He showed a famous battle from the Korthan War. Ships maneuvered in three-dimensional space. Weapons fired across vast distances. It was complex and difficult to understand. The Draxi students were excited, their scales bright with interest. The Theran students were leaning forward, feathers raised. But the human students sat calmly, watching with neutral expressions. After the lesson, Vexithar called Jake, Lisa, and Marcus to stay behind. When the other students had left, he spoke to them. "I have a question for you," he said. "That orbital battle I just showed. You all sat very still during the presentation. Did you find it boring?" Jake shook his head. "No, sir. It was very interesting. I was comparing the tactics used in that battle to similar scenarios I have studied." "How many orbital combat scenarios have you run in training?" Vexthar asked. "About 850 times, sir. About 200 from the defender's position, like in your lesson, more from the attacker's position." Vexthar was quiet for a moment. "I have commanded ships in orbital combat 7 times in actual war. You have died in space 850 times in simulation." "Yes, sir. But simulation is not the same as reality. You have real experience. You know what it actually feels like when your ship takes damage, when crew members die for real, when your decisions have real consequences. That knowledge cannot be simulated. That is what we need to learn from you." Lisa added, "We know how to fight, sir, but you teach us why we fight. You teach us how to carry the weight of command, how to live with the choices we make. That wisdom only comes from real experience." Marcus spoke last. "Our training prepares us for the mechanics of war. Your teaching prepares us for the reality of war. Both are necessary. We are grateful for both." Vexthar felt something warm inside his chest. These young humans, with all their training and preparation, still showed such respect and humility. They could have been arrogant. They could have thought they knew everything, but they did not. "Thank you, cadets," he said softly. "You have taught me something important. I will never forget it." As the weeks turned into months, the Academy began implementing changes based on what they learned from human training methods. Other species started increasing their simulation hours, not to the same extreme levels as humans, but more than before. The Academy also changed how it viewed failure. Before, failing a simulation was seen as bad. Now it was seen as a learning opportunity. Students were encouraged to try difficult scenarios where they might fail, because failure taught important lessons. Professor Kelmon wrote a paper about human psychology and preparation. It was read across the galaxy. Other military academies contacted him for information. Everyone wanted to understand how humans had developed such effective training methods. But for Jake, Lisa, Marcus, and the other human students, life continued normally. They attended classes. They studied. They trained. And yes, they sat quietly in the back of classrooms, watching and learning with calm, prepared minds. One evening, Jake sat alone in the observation deck. It was a quiet place with large windows showing the stars. He often came here to think. Lisa and Marcus found him there. They sat down beside him without saying anything at first. They just looked at the stars together, comfortable in the silence. Finally, Lisa spoke. "Do you ever think about what it will be like if we actually have to use our training? Not in simulation, but for real?" Jake nodded. All the time. I wonder if I will be as calm as I am in simulations. I wonder if all this preparation will actually work when lives are really at stake. Me too, Marcus said. I have died 1,000 times in training, but dying for real is different. I know that. We all know that. But that is why we train, Lisa said. Not to be fearless, but to be prepared despite our fear. To know what to do even when we are scared. To have practiced so much that our training carries us through even when our emotions want us to panic. Do you think Earth will ever need us to fight for real? Marcus asked. Jake was quiet for a long moment. I hope not. That is the whole point, is it not? We prepare so thoroughly that no one wants to fight us. We train so hard that war becomes unnecessary. The best victory is the battle never fought. But if the battle does come, Lisa said, we will be ready. Yes, Jake agreed. We will be ready. They sat together in silence, watching the stars. 3 young humans who had fought 10,000 battles without ever seeing real war. 3 warriors who hoped they would never need to be warriors. Across the galaxy, humanity continued its quiet vigil. On Earth and on colony worlds, young people trained in simulations. They practiced tactics. They learned strategy. They prepared for conflicts they hoped would never come. It was not because humans loved war. It was because they had learned from their history. They had seen what happened to civilizations that forgot how to defend themselves. They had studied the falls of empires and the collapse of peaceful societies that grew too comfortable. So they trained. They prepared. They turned every generation into quiet, calm defenders who sat peacefully in classrooms, but could transform into efficient warriors if needed. Other species in the galaxy were beginning to understand this now. The Galactic Council started asking Earth for advice on training methods. Military leaders from dozens of worlds visited Earth to study human preparations. What they found surprised them. Earth was peaceful. The cities were beautiful and calm. The people were friendly and welcoming. There were no massive armies marching through streets. No weapons displayed proudly in public squares. But in training centers and simulation facilities across the planet, young humans were fighting invisible battles. They were learning tactics that most species only discovered in actual war. They were experiencing defeat after defeat until victory became familiar, and they were doing it quietly, without boasting, without threatening anyone. They were simply preparing. Back at the academy, Commander Vexthar stood at his window one evening. Below him, students from many species were training together. He saw human students working with Draxi cadets, Corthan officers studying alongside Theran pilots. The humans were teaching others about their training methods, not keeping them secret but sharing them freely, because they understood something important. The more prepared everyone was, the less likely war became. If every species could defend itself well, then aggression became pointless. Instructor Tavara came to stand beside Vexthar. They watched the students together in comfortable silence. The humans are changing how we think about military training, she said. And peace, yes, Vexthar agreed. They have shown us that the strongest defense is thorough preparation, that the best warriors are those who hope never to fight, that sitting quietly in class is not weakness but confidence. Do you think they will change the galaxy? Tavara asked. Vexthar considered this carefully. I think they already have, just by being who they are, just by showing us a different way to think about strength and preparation. In their dormitory rooms, Jake, Lisa, and Marcus were preparing for the next day's classes. They reviewed their notes. They studied tactical manuals. They ran a few quick training simulations on their personal devices. They did not talk about being special or different. They did not discuss how other species now looked at them with new respect. They just did what they had always done. They prepared. They practiced. They learned, because that was what humans did. That was who they were. A species that had learned from thousands of years of war that the best way to preserve peace was to stay ready for war. To train every generation to be capable of great violence but wise enough to avoid it. They were warriors who sat quietly. Defenders who looked peaceful. Fighters who preferred diplomacy. But underneath the calm surface was preparation so deep and thorough that it had become part of their identity. When instructors asked humans why they sat quietly in class, the answer was simple. They sat quietly because they had already seen the chaos. They sat calmly because they had already experienced the panic. They sat peacefully because they had already fought the wars, not in reality but in preparation. And for humans, that preparation was so thorough and so realistic that the line between simulation and reality had blurred. They carried within them the experiences of 10,000 battles, the wisdom of 10,000 failures, the confidence of 10,000 victories, so they sat quietly. Not because they had nothing to say, but because they had already said it all in their training. Not because they were bored, but because they were ready. Not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to choose peace. And that quiet strength, that calm readiness, that peaceful preparation was perhaps the most powerful weapon any species had ever developed. Not weapons that destroyed, but a mindset that prevented destruction. Not aggression that conquered, but preparation that deterred conquest.